All right, you guys have now worked on your thesis statement and your 2 claims and your evidence, and now it's time to move on to the third section. And the third section is what really makes an argument rather than just trying to persuade someone of your opinion. We're actually creating an argument, and I would imagine that this third section is something that you haven't done in your writing before. Okay, so this is kind of moving into something new, and TPRQ, I've told you guys that Q part is the hardest part of your thesis statement. This last part that we're working on, the outline, that's going to be the hardest part of your outline. I'm just telling you guys that so you know that it's going to be difficult. Most likely, a lot of you guys will be corrected when you get to your outline, and that's okay. It's difficult for my 10th graders, but it's really a critical part of an argument and something that they'll be looking for on standardized tests. But more importantly than that, I think you guys need to realize how to make a good argument so that way the debaters in here, you guys can have stronger arguments in what you're saying. Was that a question? Okay. All right, so up until now in my particular outline that I have, I'm talking about this eraser law still, and my first claim is that it should not exist because individual responsibility is important.
We're going to get it to work, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
She's staying down there, and she told me to come back down here and ask.
Just work in the back table there, Branson. Branson's in our video now. I'm video recording right now, Branson.
Cool.
All right. My second claim was that it's important that we don't enable people to permanently delete something that happens. So those are my 2 claims. What I have so far is something that supports my thesis. Okay, but I have not yet really dealt with some of the weaknesses in my argument. I did in my qualify statement, but I need to deal with some of the weaknesses that I have. And I'm going to do that with something called a counterclaim that actually becomes something that's called a counterargument. Okay? A counterclaim is going to be what someone else is going to use to say, hey, you're wrong because of this. And then I'm going to create a counterargument and say, no, actually, and I'm going to respond to someone else's criticisms. And we're kind of making up this someone else, okay? But what would my opponent say? And I want to introduce a couple different terms while we're doing that. I've already talked about counterclaim. That's what someone else is going to criticize your argument for. And then we have our counterargument. That's our argument against that criticism. And we're going to respond to that either using a concession or a refutation. And these are the kind of words that kind of confuse my students at first until we're used to using them. So I'm going to go over the meaning of these words and then explain how they work in an actual outline. And I need to switch my tab here. Okay. The first thing, concession and refutation are ways that we can respond to people that criticize our position. Okay. And a concession basically is, they call it a thing conceded, okay? We're granting the other side that they might have a point, okay? So that's one way we can respond to that by saying, all right, you person that opposes me, you actually have a valid point. And here's how we can correct that point, okay? That's one way we can deal with someone else's argument. The other way that we can deal with someone else's argument, and this is probably how we deal with other people's arguments more often, is this idea of refutation. And that basically says, okay, I get that you say that, but I still think you're wrong, and this is why you're wrong. Okay? So in the concession, we're giving the other person Travis? I need you paying attention up here. In a concession, we're giving people a chance to have a good point, okay? In a refutation, we're telling them, no, you're wrong. I want to give an example of this. My husband recently is trying to purchase a very, very expensive sound system for our house. Like, it's crazy. He's really into music. Like, that's his thing. And when I came home from work on Wednesday, he had a long argument for me about, and not an argument like we were fighting, but he was making claims and evidence and all this stuff about why this is a really good reason and we have to do this, okay? And like his first claim was that it's cheaper right now, and his evidence was that he was able to get free financing for 18 months, so we wouldn't have to pay any interest, and we'd have low monthly payments, okay? So that was his first claim that he had, and he had some other claims to make and such, okay? But his last argument that he made, and he wasn't really thinking of this officially, okay? My husband's not that much of a nerd, but he was actually doing it in the way that he was talking about it. He had a counter argument, and he knew that my main problem with this sound system is it's expensive, okay? That was my argument in opposition to his, okay? It's expensive. We can't afford it, all right? So he basically said, all right, I understand that you think this is expensive. So he was responding to my counterclaim that it's too expensive. And then he had an argument in response. We can budget for it. Okay? So he was kind of like, you have a point, but then he used a refutation. Okay? But actually you're wrong because I already made a budget, and he did in response to this. He wrote out a whole budget for us to show how we could afford it. Okay? That was his counter argument. He knew that my argument was it's expensive, and it still is expensive. All right? But he had an argument about how we could afford it. He gave a refutation, okay? He also had a little bit of a concession as well because he also conceded, I understand it's expensive, but this is how we can afford it. Okay, yeah.
Did you guys get it?
He might be getting it this weekend. He had a good argument, though. And to be honest, like that kind of, okay, to actually see those numbers in his response, his counter argument to my argument that it's expensive was very convincing, okay? This actually has practical applications for you guys in the future to know how to do a counter argument, because someday you might want something too. Yeah.
Jesus gets what he wants.
I know. I'm really not mad about it, okay? And we didn't have like an argument, but that's kind of how the discussion went. He had a really good counter argument for me. All right, so going back to our outline that we have, let me show you how this would work to make a counter argument in this particular prompt, okay? I think one of the strongest arguments for having this bill, because I'm against this bill in my essay, okay? One of the strongest arguments is that teenagers have a lot to lose if they post something that ruins their reputation, okay? That's what someone who was opposing my position might say is a good point, okay? We need to have this law because you guys have a lot to lose, right? Because your whole future's ahead of you. Yeah.
What if, like, someone takes a picture of you and they put it on Facebook, you know, way up there, and you can't take it down because you objected to this law?
You can sue them.
Well, this law wouldn't actually take care of that, Alexis, because it only lets you take down the stuff that you posted. So there needs to be a lot more laws about this, okay? I think. But, yeah, all right. So, but this is a really good point that someone who disagrees with me is making. And I think it's important for all of us to realize that these issues are complex. Even though we have really strong opinions, that doesn't mean the opponent is necessarily like completely wrong. So I'm going to give you examples. So that's my counterclaim. That's what someone would say in disagreement. I'm going to give you an example of a concession, and then I'm also going to give you an example of a refutation. However, to be clear, you only need one of them. And you're going to have to choose which is a stronger argument for you to make based on what the counterclaim is. Sometimes a concession is really helpful for you to say, hey, I'm a reasonable person and I understand this is an issue. Okay, and that makes a strong argument. Sometimes you just need to tell the other side, no, you're wrong, and this is why. Okay, and you need to make that decision for yourself. A concession here that I would make is, okay, yes, they have a point, and this is why websites should be required to have a delete button. But they shouldn't need to contact the company to get things deleted. So the law is still a problem. I cannot spell today. I'm going to have to go back and fix that. Okay, notice in my concession, I'm saying, hey, this point here that my opponent's making, they have a point. And here's what we can do to fix that. All right, that's what a concession looks like. This is good. I kind of get it. This is how we can fix it. I'm not contradicting my argument here, though. I'm not saying, hey, okay, now that you made that point, I guess all of this that I have up here is wrong. I'm not doing that. Okay, but I am showing that they have a point and that I understand that. Yeah.
Well, what if you put some pictures of Hazel on Facebook and then whenever she, gets old, she doesn't want them up there and she asks you to take them down and you're like, well, I would, but I said that this law was stupid, so I can't do it now. What about that?
I definitely, I think there's a lot of privacy issues online that lawmakers are going to have to deal with in the next couple of years. I hope they deal with that because, hopefully I'm not that kind of mom. I kind of like Hazel at this point, and I think I would do that for her, kind of. And I'm making a video that shows that, right?
But you can't do it if you objected to this law. You said no.
I know. It's just an essay, guys. Just an essay. All right. Now, here's what I could do. And I'm giving you an example of both of them. Remember, you just have to do either a concession or refutation. Don't do both or your essay is going to sound crazy, okay? So in my refutation, I'm going to say, okay, no, they're wrong, okay? And I'm going to say, basically, teenagers who post inappropriate information should not be able to hide that. Others should know what they truly are like. I don't know why my keyboard keeps doing that. Okay.
Well, what if you were like drunk or something?
I don't actually agree with this refutation. I'm just giving you an example of what that would look like, okay? So basically I'm saying, no, this counter claim that you guys, my opponent has, this is wrong and this is why. Okay? I'm giving a new claim that kind of disagrees with that. All right? Then what you're going to do next, you need to figure out which one of these you're going to do. Then again, you need to come back to here and come up with some evidence to show that that's true. Okay? And again, we're talking about facts or news stories or quotations. And those quotations are not going to support the counterclaim. They're going to support either your concession or refutation, which is kind of like a new claim that you're making. All right? So my evidence could be my friend Sarah posts all sorts of rude things online. Future employers should know what type of person she is. Okay. I'm just making that up, actually. It's hard to prove this point, okay? I'm just giving you an example, all right? But your evidence needs to support either your concession or your refutation. Make sure that when you choose a counterclaim, you're not repeating something that you already have up in your claims when you respond to it, okay? Because this needs to kind of bring up a new point you haven't yet. And this just makes your argument a lot more complex in what you're doing. And it also forces you to think about some of the complexity of the issues from the other side. Okay, and that's where your pro and con chart is going to be helpful because you've already kind of considered what people that disagree with you already think. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about that?
No. Yes.
Yes.
You spelled the and things wrong.
I know. It kept skipping my typing. I'll need to fix that. Thank you.
Not today.
I know.
Wait, are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording. All right, so that's where I'm going to end. So, bye, everyone. Thanks for joining. You guys are so friendly.